Welcome back. Pregame.tv breaking down the SEC. We have an Auburn Tiger team that's going to win the national championship, and they're only laying 2.5. It shows how good Mississippi State has gone. Scott Spreitzer, take it away.
Yeah, you know, it's two play-on teams. Well, I guess you could call it play-on teams going into last week for most people. It's funny, I had Mississippi State against A&M as my top bet last weekend in college football, so my top play at pregame.com. I got to admit, I didn't expect a 48-17 jump out of the blocks blowout. I thought they would win by a couple of touchdowns.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I was on them as well. I think you got on them earlier than anyone. That was like your early send-out back when it was like -1.
It was Sunday night, Monday morning, leading into that week when I jumped on Mississippi State in that one. We were talking about it. I do a Paul Feinbaum show on the SEC Network on Fridays from time to time, and we were talking about that game, and it was funny because, you know, his network, his radio show, everything was emanating from Starkville. I know the ESPN guys were over in Biloxi, I believe, but everybody else was in Starkville. I mean, this town was pumped for this game. The school was incredibly pumped for this game. My one caveat going into it was the fact that they were so bad against the pass, but it ended up not hurting them because Dak Prescott and the offense was so strong in that game. The game that I was wrong on, and I didn't bet this one, didn't have it at pregame, but on Feinbaum's show, I said I thought LSU would keep the game closer despite the fact that they had a freshman starting at quarterback against Auburn than the number said. I thought they would hang that number. Well, obviously that was wrong. They were crushed start to finish. It was over with before it started. Auburn beats them 41-7. So it's funny, I was so right on Mississippi State, but I missed LSU and Auburn. What I was going to say about this game and talk to you about, Steve, a little bit is that a lot of people right now are jostling between, is Florida State the best team in college football? Are the Auburn Tigers the best team in college football? And my point is, after what we saw last weekend, is there a best team in college football right now? I mean, Florida State, you can knock them off. They're not, you know, they're not a team that is playing at the level that they did last year. Auburn goes into Manhattan, Kansas, and if it's not for a place kicker, you know, kicking field goals like I drive off the tee in golf, they win that game in all likelihood, the Kansas State Wildcats, but yet they beat the heck out of Les Miles last week. So there's a lot of teams. There's got to be a dozen teams right now that could be in that Final Four.
Well, to be fair to Auburn, though, we take a look at their schedule and we say, you know, that win over Arkansas. Well, Arkansas is pretty damn good.
A little bit better than people thought. Yeah.
And they covered my laying 23.
Yep.
And then you look at that K-State and they're like, wow, they could have lost to K-State. Well, guess what? K-State's pretty damn good.
Great coach.
You know, and it was a great spot for them as well. So the fact that you play a coin flip game when the other team has everything going for them, yeah, you'd like to see them, like you said, cover every single game. But the fact is they did go 11-2 against the number last year. So here's a team that the bookmakers and the bettors, I think, have consistently undervalued what Malzahn has been able to do there. And we might look back on this and say, wow, they didn't pick up on the fact that Auburn was as good as Alabama for the past 2 years. Right?
Listen, I was never a big Gene Chizik fan. When he was at Iowa State, I didn't like his coaching. You know, of course, he was a defensive coach for the most part with the Sooners and things of that nature. I saw him out here a couple of years before he took the Auburn job, or I guess the year before, because he was only at Iowa State for a cup of coffee. And his team was the most undisciplined football team that I've ever seen. I used to go to every UNLV home game. So if I say that another team besides UNLV was the most undisciplined football team I've ever seen, you know how bad it was. We sat back then, when I used to go to the games, usually around midfield, and we were about 3 rows from the field, right behind the visitors' bench. And so I saw this team was all over the place. So Chizik leaves Iowa State, goes and takes the Auburn job. He inherits, you know, the human lottery as far as his genes are concerned when it comes to Cam Newton, and they win the national title. As soon as Cam Newton's gone, we saw what Gene Chizik's all about as a head coach. So my whole point was, making a short story into a long story, is that I do appreciate what Gus Malzahn has done, because under Chizik, this program was in a steep and steady and fast decline, and they're back at the top of being able to play almost year in, year out now, just since Gus Malzahn's been there, for national titles.
Very good. Well, I think we're on the same page here. You want to go ahead and make it official?
I definitely will. Let's do it. All right, I'm going to go with the Auburn Tigers here and lay the points, and it's going on the road to Mississippi State. Last week, again, as I mentioned, I had the Bulldogs as my top play on Saturday, but I think they're in a tough spot here. Sometimes when these teams win these like breakout games, and I'm not going to really call Mississippi State's win over A&M a breakout game like Ole Miss over Alabama was, but when you get away from home, sometimes it helps you out a little bit better than playing that next week at home, and it gets you away from all the hoopla, all the hype, and the fans and everything else. that might play a small part of this, but what it really comes down to is I think Auburn's just better at what they do than Mississippi State is theirs to a certain extent, enough to get this win and this cover. Dak Prescott ran the ball almost 24 times last week. I like this kid as a college football quarterback. You try to run the ball 20 to 25 times per game, week in, week out in the SEC, you're going to run into some walls, and I think this week's it. So I like the Auburn Tigers minus the points in this one.
I like the play, too. And like in terms of like the Allen Boston School of handicapping, there is no way Mississippi State can be a legitimate top 10 team. They're just not that good. Auburn can be a top 5 team. They can win a national championship, but there's no way any Mississippi State team with their cowbells, they could be 18 on their good year or 15 when it's all said and done. They're not going to be in the top 10. They lose this game. I like the play.
All right, let's go with it.
All right. We stay with us here at pregame.tv. We broke down 2 college football games. Scott mentioned Cam Newton at Auburn. Let's go to the NFL. We'll be talking about Cam over with the Carolina Panthers in a video we'll do on teasers. But first, we're going to be breaking down the New England Patriots. Hey, maybe they're not dead yet, against the resurgent Buffalo Bills. Stay with us. Pregame.tv.